Okay, today I'll present a psychologically oriented framework on distance education. And to stay on our tight schedule, I'll take questions at the end.
That sounds like a plan, Dr. Mankelwicz. Just real quickly, my name is Haley Sampson. I am an ADEIL board member and I'll be the moderator for our session. Before we begin, on behalf of ADEIL, we'd like to thank our host, Troy University, of which Dr. Mankelwicz is a faculty member, and our technical coordinator, Marcy Shirley, also from Troy University. And we are thankful for their contributions in making this event possible. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. John Mankelwicz from Troy University.
Thank you. Thank you. Today I'll present a psychologically oriented framework on distance education. And I'll run through the items on the agenda and stay on our tight schedule and take questions at the end. Now, my view is that the challenges to distance education are largely the same for society in general, as it faces a world of increasing social and technological change. A couple of quotes here, I think, nicely define the problem as I see it anyway. Mainly the internet is keeping us less informed than we should be, and promoting some information liberty or not. In particularly, many of the authors stress that it's taking us less time to what we don't know. Harry, for instance, suggests that a rapid pace and stress, it reduces our ability to concentrate. We don't necessarily get into the highest levels of concentration. So, but even our less structured mind wandering thoughts, which can be very, very productive and lead to creative ideas. We suffer in particular the illusion of explanatory depth. That is, we believe we know more than we do. Importantly, people suffer cruel optimism.
Dr. Mankelwicz, I'm so sorry to interrupt your flow. Speaking of flow, but we're having a hard time hearing you. I think when you lean back in your chair, it's just too far away from the mic. And so
better.
Just lean in. Yes, thank you. Just want to be able to capture your presentation. I appreciate
it. Full optimism. And that's not a good thing. I think a lot of our students, online students, suffer from full optimism, overestimate their knowledge. If they go into exams, it's just one exam. The end result of all this can be captured by what's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Those most lacking in knowledge and skills are least able to appreciate that lack. Now, I reviewed several frameworks, published frameworks, what distance education is supposed how the different elements are put together. And nice listing the elements as they see them. They suggest some linkages in what they call dialogues. I'll come to that in a moment. It's very, very important. Those dialogues are really the key, I think, to understanding and improving distance learning. Also, the framework seems to stress the present tense, not much of an evolutionary factor, and causality is a little bit soft, hinted at, rarely explicit, and most of the frameworks don't emphasize feedback very much. This presentation will take a finer brain approach. psychological approach. And I want to start with just some starting points. We're talking about empowering the future, empowering distance learning. Power, the most common definition of it, and there are many definitions, is potential influence. Not influence actually exerted, but potential influence, what you have. And it is best measured by determinants and results. It can be measured in different ways, by representation, by symbols, and so forth. I think in our terms, in distance learning, what are the determinants increasing the learner's ability to learn and the instructor's influence in instructing, determinants, and then measure the results as well. So to empower really means that we are providing and enabling the determinants. And those determinants are largely contained in those dialogues I'll come to in a moment. Now, it's not technology, which is key, but it's people times technology, the interaction of people and technology. This is an area that IBM has stressed for a generation, much to their success. And we thank their contributions to distance learning. You know, we empower people through the dialogue. First, the dialogue with their own technology. Come back to that in a second. Now, there's less agreement on other concepts. What do we mean by talking about a framework? You can see this framework I'm proposing today is a little bit different from other frameworks. And what is distance learning? Distance education. And will the future be like the present in distance education? I would say the technologies and markets will change drastically. However, the present trends in these markets and overall will stay the same. For instance, EdSmart. The EdSmart company suggests that the total market in distance education in 2025 will grow to $300 billion and sustain growth. And that the visual orientation of the technologies we use in augmented reality, vision, virtual reality, so forth will remain. Will be collaboration? Yes, it will probably be increased by fiat, demanding more interaction between students, more interaction with us. And sometimes that collaboration, even though it's key, is having to be forced today. I suggest that will continue. Individualized learning packages, certificates, use of games and simulations, all of these I think will continue. What do we mean by dialogues? How do they affect learning? Well, dialogues are enabled by resources for people and the technological resources. And three, and I have color-coded them for a reason, which will come to in a moment. Interpersonal dialogue between the student himself. And remember I said that the real element is student technology dialogue. And so you have to put that into place too. The dialogue within the students and the dialogue with the technology. Interpersonal dialogues and content, very important. We all realize this in principle when we exist student contact with each other so many times per week. And that social interpersonal, social dialogue also. We seems to be in agreement on that. Even in the social dialogue, it's not specific. They both things to make you more satisfaction. The more richer the dialogue, the more learning. That based on the biases that even sort about. A lot of debate is about biases. We have a number of very commonly known biases: intentionality bias, hindsight bias, proportionality bias, confirmation bias, especially important when we're doing any kind of original. The tendency to look only for evidence that sustains our existing beliefs. Our biases also distort the nature of our thought, how we think. We have a tendency to emphasize words and stories over facts and numbers, and W uses that term emotional numeracy. We misperceive facts accordingly, don't put them into the right linkages, and we tend to make bidirectional cause and effect errors in our thinking. We tend to bias towards the middle in terms of middle situations could exist, middle numbers in sequence, middle probabilities. And we tend to think that other people are like us, which is true sometimes, but not all the times. How does all this play out into the concepts of learning? Interpersonal dialogue, clearly, do you perceive something? Do you accept what you perceive? Do you desire to act on it? And this moves across the domains of cognition and effect. Now, the content dialogue and the social dialogue with other people affects our actions, our behaviors. Conversation is an act, it is a behavior. Biases can affect each of these psychological processes as we move through, and they are sequential. You're going to expect some distortion from bias at each stage. So here is a proposed activity sequence in distance learning. What happens? The instructor is acting upon the learner and the tech. The learner and the tech are interacting. Their interaction is what we're really concerned with here, and that's why I draw a solid line bar through here. And that impacts what the learner does here, impacts both measured learning and other learning. In both in turn, these two, again, interacting, impacts the satisfaction. These blocks of performance and satisfaction over here, I'm following the familiar that satisfaction follows performance from our OB. Now, how do we make this into a framework more specifically for distancing? Well, still have the basic blocks there, but I suggest that here, the red-coded intra dialogues that here in content discussion, mainly with other students, so the instructor can get into the school. Would that our students would want to talk more? Would that we could get them to put on their cameras? So for content discussion, finally, the social discussion. Let's go back. The social discussion, social dialogue comes in as a moderator. Every time putting social social mainly of satisfaction and the content mainly include of the learners' abilities that they need to perform. And I put feedback into the model. I felt was important, particularly measured learning. This other learning doesn't make for good feedback. But measured learning was to the learner and to the instructor. The instructor always gets some feedback in which they can determine their own actions in the situation. And how do we improve distance learning? Focus on the dialogues. Focus on the dialogues. And how would you do that? In our big systems, adjust the feedback to both instructor and learner. Provide provisions in the system for more feedback in more places, more kinds of feedback, more frequent feedback, richer feedback, and for the instructor to explicitly discuss biases with the students. The students don't know their bias. Actually, instructors don't know their bias a good bit of the time. In particular, it's hard to see your own bias. Well, then enhance the interpersonal dialogue with the learner and technology. And you can't regulate that, really regulate that, but you can improve the environment a little bit to hopefully improve it. Upgrading of technology and instructions. And what's the weakest part of any technical product that's sold, whether it be hardware or software? The instructions. The instructions. Oftentimes written by someone with a very, very poor grasp of English, sadly. And use assignments that demand interaction with different parts of the instruction. That's a way to and enhance interpersonal dialogue. More team projects. And I can have to confess, I've been very hesitant at times to use team projects in distance learning, but I think that's going to be the wave of the future mandated, and it's probably a good idea to start as quickly as we can. And enhance social interpersonal dialogue. How do you do that? That social dialogue, which may only hit tangentially, if at all, provocative topics. To be a little bit more aggressive and provocative as instructors. Well, here are the main references I use, but I use quite a few, so I think it's fruitless to do that, just as it's fruitless to go over every major in the existing frameworks. What I've shown today may be what was my own ideas, and probably shown a lot of my own biases. You'll forgive me for that. And I'd say I'll call the presentation here. I trust we have some time for question and answers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mankelwicz. We do have time for questions, and we can either unmute ourselves or we can put questions in the chat.
Well, I thought the statement about individualized learning was very intriguing, and I hadn't really thought about that, but it seems to be a future direction that we're heading toward, especially due to improvements in AI.
Many instructors told me that they don't sign term papers. It may be for very good reasons, because they feel that they're not appropriate within their pedagogical style or the nature of the class or the subject matter to do it, or it may just be that they don't want to grade them. But I always put in term papers because I feel that that's a way of giving the student choice, some range of choice, what they're going to work on. and an opportunity to actually apply some of the concepts. But even something as simple as a term paper is an element of individualized academic.
Just to just to add on to that, I'm just thinking about substantive feedback, and in one of your previous slides, you showed how feedback impacts bias and the dialogues there, and wondering if there are additional thoughts we could discuss around providing substantive feedback, right, which is the Department of Ed defines as interacting directly with students' work, and also your feedback that demonstrates monitoring progress of the students' learning, and how bias impacts those two aspects of feedback.
Oh boy. Obviously, there are a million things that fit in here today. All those aspects of feedback. Feedback for, I think, originally knowledge of results, they're motivating function, it had an informational function, even a reward function, so forth. I think some students feel relieved that you give them feedback, that you, especially that they, if you're actually reading what they write, reading what they say. And I try in, especially in the beginning, take one, whether it's a good good write-up or comment or not, put in one small point that they split, that individualized specifically to them, to let them know that I'm concentrating. In Philadelphia, top city kids, and I was teaching there, the main thing that they were afraid of is getting lost in the system, that no one was really paying attention.
Yes, students definitely want to hear what you think about, what their instructors think about their ideas and their thoughts, right? If I'm connecting my own thoughts on your comments.
Please suggest some area.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you, Dr. Mankelwicz.
Always suggest some area, even a small area, even if it's a really, really good assignment that they've done, so it feels constructive. Engaged with them, yes, always constructive, not just so that you're not another boss on their case.
Sure, sure. So engaging, I think I heard most of that, and what I picked up was engaging with students is one thing, but instructing is not necessarily equivalent to engagement. Did I pick up on that?
Simply a published lecture, in this case, I'll throw them in mainly as PowerPoints, or maybe a short recording, or even just a lengthy weekly announcement. That is not actually personally engaging with them. It may be very meaningful, and you can follow up on the personal engagement with that, but that itself is not engagement.
Yes, I'm tracking with you. Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise in this work. We appreciate, Dr. Mankelwicz, your presentation, and to our attendees here, thank you for your time and engagement today. I'd like to ask you to please complete our conference evaluation, and I'm going to put that link in the chat. Let's see, let me know if you cannot access that link that I just placed in the chat. And I know we have a few more presentations lined up for the rest of the day here before we get to our awards. Is there any questions I can answer, or any help I can provide before we move on to our next presentation?
Thank you, Haley.
Thank
Thank
you.
very much.
Thank you, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the 32nd annual ADEIL conference.